Welcome back to our Salish Sea watercolor tutorial. In this video we're going to talk about what you could do to add an orca whale to your lovely paintings. At this point you've done your background sky and added some islands and then the ocean and then maybe some birds. And maybe you've been doing some research. You've been reading about orca whales, killer whales, taking some inspiration and analyzing the shape of those dorsal fins and noticing, oh, sometimes there's a little white patch near the eye, and seeing how they look when they travel together and how some might be more submerged in the water while others are sticking out more. And what does that look like? So the best thing to do is some of your own research to get a sense of how you want things to look, and then make a decision if you would like to do a pod, a family of orcas, or if you want to do a solo killer whale hunting on his own. Here's my best tip for you to get started after you've done a little bit of research and looking, is to take that painting that you've been working on, think about what makes sense for the placement. I was trying to create a site of action here with all these birds, these seagulls swooping down. Maybe there's food in this area, and maybe these orcas are on their way to find it. And what I've done is outlined in a nice sharp pencil some shapes that will guide me. I really recommend this so that you'll have a plan. Here's another one I'm going to try with just a single orca. Now you might notice right here, if I can zoom in, I left a little spot here, intending that to be the white part of the orca's side of his head. So I'm not going to fill that in with black. I'm going to leave a little bit of white. And something optional is you might want to come in after with some white acrylic paint to create some more bubbles or some water that is frothing up from behind, or some spray coming from the blowhole. That's an option, and we'll see how that looks. So let's get started. I'm going to zoom in for you here. And I've got, as always with these details, a really nice fine brush, because if you want to paint something tiny, you're going to need a tiny brush. So choose the right tool to get the job done. And I'm going to come in now and just start painting the simpler shapes. This is kind of a triangle shape. You don't have to fill it in perfectly solid. You know, if you leave a little bit of whiteness in the middle, I'm not sure if you can see that. You know, it suggests maybe some water spray. Okay. Now we'll do this one here. I often feel I have the most control when I'm watercoloring if I'm pulling the brush towards myself. Sometimes you can paint an outline, and then you can fill in that outline with a little bit of water. So I'm going to dip into the water again, and I'm just letting the water kind of swoop around, push that paint around. As you can see here, I've left a little bit of white around the face. You're not trying to do too much detail because it is such a tiny little suggestion of the whale. And you'll notice I'm creating not a very precise line between the orca and the water, because that also can suggest the rush of water around the whale. Okay? And here's another fin. And sometimes the whales will swim in what looks like a choreographed sequence, and sometimes one is up and out of the water, and one is down, and one just has the peak of the fin sticking out. Maybe one is a baby and is a lot smaller. Maybe one is the big one. And I'll do the fifth one over here. In fact, if you learn about the pods of orcas in your area, maybe you will start, like some of the experts, to be able to identify different whales after you've seen them quite a few times. There's some experts on our local waters who can identify and say, oh, that's pod such and such, and they can recognize them by the crookedness of their dorsal fin or other features. So there's lots to be gained by study, research, getting yourself out there on the water, and being a good steward of our local area. Okay, so if I zoom out, you can see, looks like a suggestion of some whales. Now if I let that dry, which I probably should before I dive in with my next move here, but I'm gonna see if I can get away with putting a bit of white paint around so you can see how that looks. I'm gonna take a little bit of acrylic, and the reason I'm using acrylic is because it's gonna dry more, it's gonna dry thick, kind of like a plastic. Whereas water you can reactivate, but once you've put on acrylic, that's it. You're done. It can't really be removed because it's a plastic-based thing. But if I wanted to create a little rush of water behind, in places where I already have blue paint, I can just kind of drag the paintbrush over. Ideally, you fully let those whales dry before you're adding anything else. And if you make a kind of trail behind them, it suggests that they were breaking through water. Of course, you could plan your whales to appear at the head of where you've left some white background paper already, and that way you can work with the paper and not have to create the white lines after. I don't know, maybe this is like a little bit of air being expelled here. Maybe you want to do a few. You could do white imprint around the eye, create some new shapes, maybe a few little bubbles. It's up to you. So have fun and play with that. Oh, maybe I'll give it a go doing one more whale. So I'm pulling the paintbrush towards myself. Gives me a little bit more control. It's nice to create a nice sharp point on that dorsal fin if I can. And I'm going to go for a smooth shape here. I'm going to leave this little white spot here. It's actually a little bit blue from the water where I'd painted, but I'm going to touch that up with some white paint after the fact. You could make this shape fully solid black, or you could trace the outline and then dab in some water and allow that water to kind of spread in between the outlines, and it will make the perimeters darker and the middle a little bit lighter. And that might suggest a rounded shape. I can also, since I have water there, I could dab to remove a little bit. That gives me a bit more dimension. All right, I'm going to take now the white paint, and this is an acrylic, that plasticky drying paint. And I should wait till the black is dry, but I'm just gonna see if I can go for it here and not blend too much. And I'm just brightening up that white spot beside the eye. I did run a bit, it's not too bad. And I'm going to take some of this white paint and then kind of drag it behind where the whale has just traveled to suggest the water breaking into small waves behind him. You could do some more dots, maybe a spray of water coming out, and maybe some bubbles along the side. Play with it and have fun. One more thing I'll add here is that you might want to use some blue that's a tiny bit darker than the blue of your ocean, maybe with a tinge of purple in it, and kind of create reflections or shadows just below your whale shapes towards the back 2/3. And that suggests a little bit of the shape of the animal below the water and of the movement of the water as the whale is traveling. And then it also creates a nice distinction and contrast for if you were to add the white paint above. And if you're doing that and you create something that's a bit too dark, just be swift to dab it up with the water. And once it's dry, maybe on top of those darker reflections, you have an opportunity to put a bit more of the white water to reflect the natural movement of that H2O. All right. Good luck. And one more thing I almost forgot is that something really nice to do with the white paint is you might want to extend some lines showing the travel path of the orca in white, and then you could underscore it with a little bit of light blue, and it has that pattern that looks like the creature has traveled from left to right there. And that's optional. What do you notice when you look at the orca whales in motion? What does the water look like behind them? Play around, keep asking questions, and keep experimenting. Have fun.